Welcome to Breathe, a weekly audio podcast presented by Breath of Life. And now, here's the host, Pastor Debleaire Snell, and co-host David Person.
Welcome to Breathe. I'm David Person, the co-host of this podcast that is presented to you by the Breath of Life television ministry. And of course, our host is Speaker Director of Breath of Life and Senior Pastor of the Oakland University Church, Pastor Debleaire Snell. How you doing, Pastor Snell?
Hey, it's another great Monday. Grateful to be with our Breathe family. And I'm truly excited about what we're going to be talking about in the studio. I think it's going to bless a lot of people.
I think so, too, because as we were discussing before we started recording, if we're going to be honest about our lives, we know that many of us who are young adults or middle-aged or even in that, headed toward the senior years or in the senior years, we are affected by things that happen in our childhood. And you and myself and Pastor Nugent were just having that discussion with our guest, who's a returning guest, actually.
That's right.
Behavioral specialist and soon-to-be doctor, Jonathan Gilbert. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me back.
Well, we're glad to have you back. And, of course, this is a testimony series on Breathe. We launched it in our last episode with our friend Jessica Barker talking about her testimony about physical healing. Right. And so now we want to get into the area of emotional healing. And we want to hear your testimony. But first, before we get into your testimony, Jonathan, can we talk a little bit about it from a clinical standpoint?
Yeah.
When we talk about emotional healing as a clinician, what comes to your mind?
So when I think about emotional healing or when that topic comes up, my mind instantly goes to childhood. Mm-hmm. If your life is a play, childhood is not just the first act. It's really when you set up the stage. Mm. So from your childhood comes all of the ways that you interface with the world. So I learn relationships in my childhood with my parents. I learn how to deal with my own emotions in my childhood. Mm-hmm. If I fall, if I'm upset, if something happens, I learn really the basis of that in childhood. Mm-hmm. And so the problem is a lot of us, we never quite learn these skills during this period. If it's because of environment, if it's because of maybe we didn't have a parent, there's a plethora of reasons that causes, to have this sort of deficit. Mm-hmm. And so when someone comes into my office, I can usually tell in about 22 minutes, I can tell if there's some sort of deficit in that's stemming from your childhood.
Wow.
Is that the case with most people?
Absolutely.
That you can probably track whatever the mental health issue is or the emotional health issue is, you can track it back to childhood?
Most of the time, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And Jonathan, would it be for both sides, meaning positive and negative?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So not just issues that you may face, but also things that are very good.
Yes.
Attributes that you have that you adjust well to the world, good perspectives and outlooks that you have, you can trace those back to some childhood experiences as well. Wow.
Absolutely.
Okay. Wow.
Absolutely. No, I this might be me talking about myself a little bit, but I feel like I got my resiliency from my childhood and from my parents. Both of my parents are very resilient people. I mean, they've been through a lot, and they are very strong. All three of me and my siblings, we've all developed that from them. Mm-hmm. So it goes both ways.
Both ways. Okay.
It goes both ways. It's not just when we talk. You always think of like, oh, you're a therapist. You probably just want to dive in my childhood. It's like, yes, I do, but not just for the bad.
Right.
I want to know like what good happened back then.
Right.
Because it's not just all bad.
It's not all bad. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I gather though from what we were talking about earlier, and even from the fact that you have a testimony, I have a testimony, that that those negative things seem to be the defining things far too often.
Yes.
Or if not defining us in terms of our entire experience, certainly they play a significant role in shaping us, even if it's the struggle, right?
Yes. Yeah, because pain is blinding sometimes. Pain can be very blinding. And so when we have childhood wounds, it's very easy for us to just focus on them, even if we're not even aware of it, because sometimes we have these wounds and we're not even aware of how they affect us. But that pain it's very blinding. It's very misleading. I always, this will be my factoid for the day, or my stats for the day. I always try to, lead people with stats and whatnot. I love that. And so this will be my question for you guys. Did y'all know that you can give an infant everything? You can give them food, you can give them, sustenance, you can give them milk, clothes to keep them warm, you can give them a roof over their head. But if they are not loved, they will still die. Wow. Did y'all know that?
I don't think I'd ever thought about that.
I don't think I ever knew that.
It makes no sense to me. It makes I have pondered this, y'all, for months now, close to a year. I don't understand it.
If they're not loved.
If they're not loved, if they do not have that skin-to-skin contact.
Wow.
And so this isn't new research. This is not new research. We have known this since the 40s and the 50s. This is not new.
There was some research done, and maybe this is what you're alluding to. There was some research done in which I think children or infants were not touched, were not handled, and then juxtaposed with some who were. And the ones who were touched, even if it wasn't by the biological parents, but by surrogates or stand-ins, they thrived, and the ones who didn't thrive.
Exactly. Wow. Exactly. It's fascinating. Y'all look this up. It is absolutely fascinating. But what I find, though, if we can talk about this from a clinical perspective, is that a lot of the time people come into my office because of this lack of love. Like it shows up in a plethora of ways. Because it's what we're really talking about is trauma. It's traumatic not to be loved. Wow. And so it develops in our addictions. If we have anger issues, it develops. We isolate. There's a number of ways. I could keep going, but there are a number of ways that this thing shows up. And so that's where I start when I think about emotional healing with my patients.
Pastor, what's your reaction to all of this as a pastor and a theologian?
It's funny because as I'm listening to certain things, there are a wide range of behaviors that I confront on a routine basis. And I think one of the challenges is being able to sift through and parse through and recognize what are the things that need to be addressed in a spiritual context, and then being able to help people identify what are those traumatic events that may emerge from childhood that are creating a deficit, that are driving some of those behaviors. And I think one of the things that I think is reminding me is that, say, for instance, you have a car has 4 tires, and it doesn't matter how full 3 of them are. If one of them is flat, it's going to hinder progress. And I think part of what needs to be a part of our conversation is realizing we're a multifaceted being. We're a physical body, a spiritual body, an emotional body, and a relational body. And putting a lot of air in the spiritual tire will not make up for the lack of air in that emotional or relational tire. Wow. And so I think a big part of that conversation needs to be making sure that we are full on all areas. And I think that's why one of the questions Jesus asked, even when he was talking to a physically sick person, it wasn't just, do you want to get well? It was, do you want to be made whole? And I think wholeness has to ultimately be one of our goals as a people, not to just have a lot of air in that spiritual tire.
That's I don't know that I've ever heard that distinction made. That's a brilliant distinction. Jesus talking about not just healing the person from that affliction, the affliction of that moment, but on a larger scale, bringing wholeness and healing to that person's whole entire being. That's great. That's a great point, Pastor. Jonathan, share your testimony about emotional healing.
So same sort of thing. You know, when starting in childhood, and I have some stories. Ones that I don't think my parents want me to tell because they're embarrassing. But y'all might like this because I know you're all the parents, and so this first one that I'm gonna tell, you're gonna feel the recoil a little bit.
Come on. I'm ready.
In the 6th grade, I accidentally drove my parents' car through our garage. And yes. And if you know anything, your 6th graders probably shouldn't be driving.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dad. I know you're going to listen to this eventually. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. I mean, I know I probably shouldn't be telling this story. But there were experiences like that, and I remember distinctly. I remember the look on my father's face. First off, they heard the crash because it was not quiet.
Wow,
it was a minivan. Do not recommend that. I remember his face. I remember my mother's face, and a sense of disappointment washed over me. Not even from them, because I don't even know if that's what they were really. In truth, because they ran to me and they embraced me, you know, like the prodigal son coming home. Like that's.
Are you fine?
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you fine?
Yeah.
Are you fine? Are you okay?
Yeah.
Did the
okay?
airbags go off?
Right.
Is my child hurt? Was their immediate response?
Wow.
But mine was my parents hate my guts. Wow. You know, I was terrified.
Right.
And I mean that's one experience of many. I was the middle child, so I won't go into that. But
Middle children.
I got into some stuff, y'all. I'm sorry. I got into some stuff. All right. I got more detentions than I'd like to admit.
Oh man.
But I took into adulthood. I could go more into it, but I took into adulthood this sense of inadequacy.
Yeah.
A deep sense of inadequacy, you know, because I look at my parents and they've done so much. They've done so much with the life that they have been given. And I look at me and I say, Jonathan, you are not stacking up.
Wow.
Even with my siblings. My siblings are rock stars, man. They are absolute rock stars. And I look at myself and I'm like, what are you doing?
Right.
What are you doing? And it took me, I'm 26. I just had my 26th birthday. It took me, and this is going to really be a self-disclosure. It took me 25 years. It took me 25 years to fully, I was going to say forgive myself, but learn to love myself.
Learn to love.
You know, it took me a while. I remember specifically, I was in my office, actually. I was sitting on my couch. And it was just a breaking point. I just reached this breaking point where I was like, you can't go on like this anymore. You just can't.
Wow.
You can't go on talking to yourself like a bully. And I had this picture on my phone. It's actually my wallpaper. It's me when I'm 3. I think I'm about 3 years old. I don't know. I'm like 2 or 3. And I said, you cannot keep talking to him like that. Wow.
Wow.
Stop it. Stop it. And I broke.
So you were berating yourself since you were a little child?
I don't know when it started, to be honest with you. I really don't know when it started. I want to say sometime, maybe elementary school, maybe 6th grade. That's about when I can pinpoint it. I haven't gotten there just yet. I'll be honest with you. It's still a journey for me. It's still a journey. But I want to say it was around 5th and 6th grade.
And you were berating yourself, not echoing what somebody else was saying.
No.
But you were this was self-generated.
Yes. Yeah, it's self-generated. And people, people on the schoolyard, I had teachers who would, say, sly comments. And then it was also feeling like I just didn't stack up because I wasn't making the best grades, like in 6th grade. I don't know how I did, but it wasn't good, And so I had all these metrics to justify how I felt about myself.
Wow.
Well, once again, we've had a great conversation here on Breathe with returning guest Jonathan Gilbert, a behavioral specialist and just a really smart young man who's been shedding some insight into this topic today for us. Jonathan's going to be back on our next episode of Breathe for part 2 of our conversation with him and Pastor Snell and Pastor Nugent. I'm David Person. God bless you. Don't forget, no matter how tough, challenging life may be, and it does get challenging, we all know it, stop pretending. You don't have to be so strong. It's okay to not be okay. But the way you address it is to stop, pray, and breathe.
Breathe is produced by David Person for Breath of Life. Christian Lawson and Damian Malone provide production assistance. The opening theme was produced by David Person and James Bowman. James Bowman and Kelvin Wooten produced the closing theme. Special thanks to our broadcast partner, WJOU-FM Oakwood University Radio. Episodes of Breathe can be found on your favorite podcasting platforms. Please like them and share. Until next time, when life gets difficult, don't forget to breathe.